Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee. Today, we're going to have our second full session on agritourism, which is a very exciting topic, I think. This is a briefing. We're not taking any votes on anything whatsoever. And we're going to cover several items that we actually covered during the first work session that we had on agritourism about a year ago. And so this is a follow-up. And this session is gonna be divided in 5 sections. After the first 3, we're gonna have Q&A. And then during the 4th one, we're gonna have another Q&A. And then the final one, then after that one, we're gonna have another Q&A. And it's just easier for this particular one. And I say this because usually during these work sessions, we hold Q&A right after the end. We're not going to do that one today just because some of these items are very different and we want to focus. So the first section will be the Maryland Department of Agriculture, the Maryland Department of Commerce, and the Office of Agriculture. If those of you who are here in person, please come forward. We have the honor of having a state delegate, Lily Chi, here among us, and I'm going to ask her to also come forward and sit at the front. And as they do that, I'm going to ask staff to please kick us off.
Sounds good. Good morning. Yeah, just a quick rundown of the agenda. So there's the first discussion is from Maryland Department of Agriculture, who are going to provide an overview of a study that they're releasing in the fall on opportunities and challenges related to value-added agriculture and agritourism. So they'll speak to that, and obviously Office of Ag has caught up to that on that as well. The second discussion will be around Maryland Department of Commerce's proposed study on agritourism, which is commissioned through House Bill 1228. And this is an opportunity to sort of discuss what that could look like and also hear from Planning's 2019 study on agritourism, which is very comprehensive and still relevant. Visit Montgomery will also present on their Brand Rural Montgomery project. And then finally, council staff will summarize some research regarding different uses that could be worth considering for discussion in the ag reserve. So,
thank you for that. And before we ask staff to speak, we're going to have the delegate.
Good morning. I'm State Delegate Lily Chi, and I want to first take a moment to thank the Honorable Chair of the Economic Development Committee and other members. Thank you for your leadership in advancing our economic opportunities in Montgomery County. I serve on the House Economic Matters Committee, and I have been focusing on economic development related issues as a state legislator. And of course, before that, I worked in Montgomery County on economic development related issues. So this is deeply personal to me, a subject about how to grow our economy in a strategic and a smart way. But more importantly, I'm here because I represent a part of Montgomery County that has the agricultural reserve in it. And I think it's time for us to update our strategies and take a close look at economic opportunities for our farming community and local businesses, right? So earlier this year during our session, I sponsored a local bill. Thanks to your support and the support of the entire Montgomery County delegation and the General Assembly, we passed the legislation to task the State Department of Commerce to take a high-level look at all of the opportunities and how to bring all the stakeholders together to elevate our agricultural economy, including agritourism. So I'm very excited that you're highlighting the agritourism aspect of this, but I loved what the staff said earlier about value-added agriculture, and that's what this is all about. So I'm really looking forward to the briefing and looking forward to working with all the stakeholders. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much for all your work and for being here with us. This is an example of how the state and the local county work together to do amazing things. So we're gonna ask the Department of Commerce to go first, Agriculture to go first, and they are virtual. Let me see.
Hi, good morning. My name's Audrey. I'm covering for Martin Prue, who is our value-added agricultural specialist. Okay, and is he pulling up? Okay, perfect. So The Maryland Department of Agriculture, through the Value Added Agricultural Program, is undertaking an initiative relevant to agritourism and many topics of today's discussion. MDA is currently developing a statewide guidance and analysis document for value-added agriculture and agritourism to collaborate with regulators and decision makers in improving the regulatory framework for an evolving agricultural landscape throughout Maryland. The purpose of this publication will be to establish a baseline understanding of the complexities of regulating agricultural enterprises as they continue expansion towards consumer-facing and value-added processing functions. This document will address existing policy, language, and processes on numerous regulatory levels, identifying challenges and opportunities related to the growth of these relevant industries through Maryland's local communities. These efforts parallel collaborative discussions with partner state agencies through multiple channels, including the Governor's Intergovernmental Commission on Agriculture, also known as GEGA. I think it's the next slide now. Okay. Over the course of drafting this document, MDA has been engaging in roundtable discussions around the state with county regulators and decision makers on the topic of agritourism and value-added agriculture. These meetings are to gather information from each local jurisdiction's regulators and decision makers to get a better understanding of existing challenges and opportunities within. Through these county-specific roundtables assembled by local agricultural and economic development specialists, planning, zoning, and permitting to include environmental health have been primary themes of discussions. Although the themes, opportunities, and challenges presented within the material are broad and generalized through a statewide lens, that local engagement was invaluable in understanding the complexities and challenges faced in regulating these unique and emerging industries. With an expected publication date in September 2025, the statewide guidance and analysis document for value-added agriculture is still being drafted, and county visits are still being conducted. Although the document is still being developed, MDA has recognized core themes of value-added agriculture for the creation of this document, included value-added processing, agritourism and food service, retail of value-added products, and other indirect, including non-food operations and aquaculture. These themes are extracted from value-added umbrella because they are each regulated differently and often at different levels of government. Okay. Sharing a few findings thus far, scalability and clarity are topics that have been frequently discussed through the process, and the theme of agritourism continues to pose challenges across many localities. Important dimensions of consideration for the specific regulation of value-added agriculture include, but are not limited to, parking areas for accommodating the public, food service facilities, restrooms, and retail sales. Many of these implications are complicated by layered regulation. Although this document will not offer formal recommendations for state or local policy, the topics, challenges, and opportunities presented in the statewide guidance document will create a foundation for collaboration and creative problem solving related to regulating these evolving industries. As Montgomery County engages in these necessary discussions related to the regulatory framework surrounding value-added agriculture and agritourism, we wanted to share some background on these ongoing complementary efforts at the state level. At this time, I would like to welcome any questions, and we do have a few Q&A questions that I guess were presented prior to the meeting today.
Can you go over those Q&A? Because I'm not going to open it up for questions until the third item. So.
Okay. Give me just a minute. So what are the findings so far? So I guess through past meetings, some challenges and opportunities have been outlined. So for challenges, no unifying definitions for agriculture for regulating or implementation. There's varying definitions across all the agencies and an inconsistency between concept and land use language. There appears to be a fragmented measurables for tracking industry growth and expansion, an outdated regulatory language and licensing structures for value-added agriculture, differing uses of commercial in concept versus regulation, and lacking regulatory formulas, a conflict overlap between regulations and commercials. State licensures inadvertently activate blockades in local regulation, and state or local exemptions can conflict with locally established codes for building. Lacking clarity and consistency in layered processes and regulation, and limited scalability for infrastructure requirements and regulatory processes. No seasonal recognition in law or regulation. Some land use terms apply beyond agricultural zones, i.e. camping and events, and state or local exemptions can conflict with established codes for building. Opportunities: established a foundational land use definition for farm, expanded agritourism language, and recognize important facets of engaging with the public, i.e. parking, retail, facilities, etc. Potential state certification for qualified value-added agriculture, ease regulatory navigation and enforcement, measurables for industry growth, and we do have state benchmarks in Vermont and New York. An alternative licensing for farms and agritourism through processing, food service, sales, and facility, and develop scalable regulations within the state code, aligning with the primary functions of the farming operation and reflecting seasonability and flexibility of accessory activities. The next question is a question about event venues on farms. So the concept and current state definition of agritourism is broad. Most uses recognized under the definition are activities that require a farm to exist. Through the engagement process of this project, it is the few activities that are not farm dependent that cause the most challenges. The statewide guidance document will spotlight existing inconsistencies and regulatory hurdles with opportunity for addressing and improving the framework. The next question was, has Montgomery County had a roundtable? MDA has engaged with Montgomery County Office of Agriculture and has been actively participating in relevant discussions facilitated by the Governor's Office of Business Advancement. MDA welcomes the opportunity to present any further information or facilitate discussions specific to the statewide guidance initiative. And the last question, parking area challenges, specifically Burnt Hill, Lone Oak. The value-added agricultural specialist has been the MDA representative in past conversation between Montgomery County and MDE. I would have to defer to the Office of Agriculture for any recent updates, though I know MDE provided updates and a path forward related to stormwater management regulations in the most recent GICA subcommittee for value-added agriculture.
Thank you so much, Ms. Broomfield. Do you have anything else to add? No?
No.
All right, we appreciate that. We're gonna hold questions until the third item. So next we have the Maryland Department of Agriculture. No, the Maryland Department of Commerce is next.
Yes, so I had two staff from the Department of Commerce, and they're both just going to introduce where they are in the study.
I see them. And the PowerPoint from Ag needs to be removed. You can start. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I am Jen Lahat. I'm the Managing Director of Policy Research and Government Affairs at the Maryland Department of Commerce. We just have a really essentially quick update and where things are on the study. Delegate Chi mentioned the background behind the study and how that came to be. But we have essentially been tasked with supporting that effort in a staffing capacity, kind of as the convener of the information that exists on the reserve and any data. And we have taken some first steps in the initial information gathering stage. That included an initial meeting with Delegate Chi and some stakeholders. And then my colleague, Amanda Lee, who is also on, if there are any questions for her, went on a tour last week, I believe, of the area to get a better understanding of the community and the geography. Our next steps involve convening the other entities that are named in the bill. And so those are the Montgomery County Planning Board, Montgomery County Office of Agricultural Services, the University of Maryland Extension, Montgomery County, and Visit Montgomery. So we are going to convene those stakeholders and then essentially take stock of what data exists and what we have in terms of the requirements of the bill and the study, and identify any gaps and determine next steps from there. So once we have the inventory of all of that, we'll develop a clear work plan and develop our next phases of the study. The study is due, I believe, June 1 of next year, right around there. So we have some time to get working on it, but we are in that initial phase right now. And that's essentially our update on this right now. And again, once we finish this section, we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much for your brief presentation. And we're gonna now ask the Montgomery County Office of Agriculture to provide an update.
It's actually planning, I think, is going to provide their update on their agritourism study from 2019.
So you guys can come forward, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Patrick Butler, I'm the Up-County Division Chief for the Montgomery County Planning Department. Great to see you, and thank you for having us. I would like to first give a big thank you to Jessica McVeary in Mid-County, who actually helped Up-County complete the agritourism study, along with Jane Siegler and Bob Sissel, the Vice Chair and Chair and Vice Chair of the Agritourism Study Advisory Committee, and all the committee members and agencies and staff that had contributed to the many hours to the development of this study. It was produced in December 2019. It's been a while. The planning board did receive a briefing on this, and right after that, the pandemic had unfolded, and so planning staff was not actually able to present to the council or the ECON committee.
And to quickly state for the record, I was on the planning board and I received this. That was a long time ago. So it's amazing that this is the first time the county council is going to be seeing this study. So this is take number 2 for me. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah. So at the time, obviously, only there was emergency status and only the highest priorities, and we're able to move forward. Master plans, things that absolutely had to get done. So. Anyways, thank you again. And with that, at its foundation, the agritourism study acknowledged that agriculture in Montgomery County has evolved since the establishment of the Ag Reserve and continues to evolve today. The Agricultural Reserve was established in the early 1980s to protect farmland, agricultural, and rural open space from suburban development. The Ag Reserve comprises nearly a third of the county's land and extends from the Patuxent River to the Potomac River. The evolution of the Ag Reserve is important in the context of the agritourism study. We'll briefly cover some changes in farming in Montgomery in the last few decades. So a significant factor in the evolution of farming in Montgomery County can be attributed to the overall loss of farmland. Between 1964 and 1978, prior to the creation of the Ag Reserve, the county lost nearly 40,000 acres of farmland to residential development. According to the Census of Agriculture produced by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the county continued to lose farmland even with the Ag Reserve in place, although you can see about the 1990s, the rate has slowed, and that sort of has leveled off and stabilized over the last decade or so. While the acres and percentage of farmland has declined, the number of farms has remained relatively stable, particularly since the 1990s. That matches that trend with the loss of farmland. However, the average size of the farms is decreasing. Most farms are less than 50 acres, and farms less than 10 acres in size appear to be growing. With the shift to smaller farms, the agricultural industry is also shifting. While commodity farming activities such as corn, soybean crops continue in the Ag Reserve, other activities have started to gain prominence. This includes tabletop food production, pick your own, as well as horticultural and equestrian industries. The desire to congregate and experience the Ag Reserve and agritourism from a social perspective is gaining in popularity. And with this shift in the industry, there's also the increased interest in agricultural education and tourism. The increased interest in agricultural education and tourism, as well as eating locally, allowed farmers in the county to diversify their businesses while preserving farm and farmland. However, a part from equestrian events and recently adopted standards governing wineries, breweries, distilleries, cideries, agritourism venues have largely been addressed individually by implementing agencies as these businesses and requests have emerged. The agritourism study was initiated to identify these issues, challenges, opportunities, and develop a comprehensive, consistent menu of potential solution to promote these activities while maintaining the integrity of the agricultural functions and rural character and charm of the ag reserve. The study builds on existing plans and resources. We relied heavily on the expertise of farmers, agritourism entrepreneurs, community members, advocacy organizations, and implementing agencies to identify these issues, challenges, and opportunities to support agritourism. And while the role of Agritourism Advisory Committee was originally envisioned as providing input at key intervals and decision points, the role evolved throughout the course of that study to ultimately craft the study themes, goals, and solutions. They played a significant role in the production of this study. The key vision that sort of guided this study states the study seeks to support the evolving nature of farming and farmland in Montgomery County through the promotion of agricultural education and tourism activities, as well as historic and cultural resources. At the same time, the study reinforces the need to continue to preserve farming, farmland, and rural open space in the county's agricultural reserve. The study vision and underlying themes of the study were developed in response to the dialogue and discussions of the advisory committee. These discussions are summarized in the study themes. The themes were drafted in consultation with the advisory committee. And to summarize, the themes are the ag reserve, its natural resources and food production capabilities should be protected and preserved, but also evolve to enhance economic viability of farming. The ag reserve and the industry that it's intended to protect has changed over the last few decades. Thus, it's necessary to convey to residents countywide how and why we have the ag reserve and how they can connect to this unique resource. There are challenges to supporting agritourism today and in the future. These include an inconsistent, undocumented process, a clear definition of agritourism uses, adequate facilities and infrastructure to support these events, balancing the need for flexibility while applying clear regulations, and inconsistent enforcement. With the foundation of the study themes, the committee established the following goals to guide the study. We'll cover some of these when we get to the slides on measuring progress, but you see them here today. There were a variety of ways to achieve the study goals. If you go to the next slide there, Bilal. For this reason, the agritourism study identifies over 30 potential solutions to promote, support, and facilitate agritourism in Montgomery County. The menu of potential solutions were organized by the study goal with that each solution supports, and the study also identifies potential mechanisms to advance the solution as well as prospective partners in implementation. The potential solutions included in the study were discussed, refined, and endorsed by the majority of the committee members. We're not able to get consensus. There was a very diverse group, very large group, differing opinions and priorities, but for the majority of these, there was a majority support by the members. The advisory committee largely achieved consensus on the menu of potential solutions. There were some potential solutions that were excluded because the majority of the committee did not support those solutions, and these included establishing a monitoring and enforcement program for agritourism initiatives to ensure that agritourism activities are permitted and accessory to agriculture, a zoning text amendment to establish standards for agritourism activities that are permitted versus those that may require a limited or conditional use, a zoning text amendment to establish an overlay zone for the agricultural reserve zone to identify permitted agritourism uses and standards for permitted, limited, and conditional use. These were included in initial drafts because several other communities in the region and across the nation manage and regulate agritourism through these processes in a similar way. However, again, the majority could not agree on these and ultimately felt for one way, shape, or form they were a little too restrictive and felt that it would be over-regulated, couldn't come to a consensus, so these were not included. The agritourism study provides a foundation to advance support for agritourism and heritage tourism, including common goals and potential solutions that can be implemented to promote agritourism in the county. Implementation of the potential solutions requires leadership investment from public sector to pursue these solutions in collaboration with relevant stakeholders. Ultimately, this is going to take partnerships to implement many of these potential solutions across the goals, including public and private agencies, institutions, advocacy organizations, advisory committees, and residents. And again, we begin to identify these prospective partners to help champion each of these potential solutions. So since then, we have made some progress. First, we have established a coordinated review process across multiple agencies, which begins with the Office of Agriculture. Entity that would like to do some agritourism related use or agricultural related use first reaches out to the Office of Agriculture. They gather any necessary information. They share that at a monthly coordination meeting with the Department of Permitting Services and the Planning Department, all with the eye towards a collaborative, coordinated process where someone's not having to go across multiple agencies to get answers. We have sort of established I won't say one-stop shop, but at least a first point of contact, and we recognize the Office of Agriculture as the lead agency in these requests. So try to be as helpful and efficient as possible. Then you're going to hear today about the great work of Visit Montgomery and their consultant they've been doing in coordination with the Office of Agriculture and the ag community on branding and marketing in the ag reserve and agritourism, which is not necessarily confined to the ag reserve in Montgomery County. So again, one of the potential solutions here was to identify funding and resources to promote, market the agricultural reserve, agritourism, and heritage tourism to Montgomery County residents. So hear more about that here soon with the great work Kelly and their consultant have been doing. Next one. There are also multiple websites on agritourism in Montgomery County. The Office of Ag, Visit Montgomery, and several others offering a particular area of focus or point of view. I think there's still work to be done here, potentially with Visit Montgomery and Office of Ag, so that there's sort of one consolidated website. There's a lot of great information out there, but it's still somewhat decentralized, so there is still that need for that central location for information and activities that are occurring. And again, this last one that I've listed, to develop a series of agritourism heritage tourism trails, like wine, brewery, or ice cream trails throughout the Ag Reserve. Also to develop a comprehensive wayfinding signage system to direct patrons to agritourism venues, et cetera. So again, you're going to hear more about progress towards this goal and potential solutions from Visit Montgomery and their consultant. I did not include a slide on some of the suggested code or regulatory processes, improvements in streamlining of that. Would like to point out a few years ago that there was a subdivision regulation amendment to exempt agritourism activities from subdivision, plan of subdivision. So there is some efficiency there, particularly as it related to improvements that were required for master plans were very costly and seemed to be cost prohibitive for the size and scale of the agritourism requests that we were seeing. And also recently there was a ZTA, as you know, to allow some camping, some temporary outdoor stays at these venues to encourage, but you've heard of it, right? To encourage and support the agritourism activities occurring out here. So with that, I think I'm going to pause here and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. As a reminder, we're going to pause for questions until we are after item number 3, which is the Office of Agriculture update on wayfinding grants. We have a lot to talk about from everything that you guys have mentioned, but let's pause until that section.
Good morning, everybody. Econ Committee. My name is Mike Shuffle. I'm the Director of the County's Office of Agriculture. Thank you for having me here. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce my great staff. We have Natalia Salazar, Business Development Specialist, and behind me we have new and improved Mike Wyan, who's our Farmland Preservation Administrator. So these are really the boots on the ground that help us get these issues moving forward. So to the specific question about the wayfinding in the Ag Reserve, in the Maryland General Assembly session, the budget bill, Senate Bill 360, the Office of Agriculture was called out specifically to receive a $25,000 grant from the Maryland Department of Agriculture to help provide some roadside signage for ag and agritourism businesses. Our office, along with the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, have been working with a process that would allow interested agritourism businesses that meet certain standards, and we basically have modeled the state's the Tourist Area Corridor Signage Program. We've kind of mirrored that language to see if a business is interested. If you can check these boxes, you'll go ahead and we can work with you on that application. As you well know, we don't have only county roads in Montgomery County. There are also state roads. We've had to involve the Maryland State Highway Association with these signage discussions. That's where this stuff can get confusing, and who's in charge of what, who's on first, and that kind of stuff. So we've been working with State Highway. We've been working with our county DOT. We believe we have a good path working forward, at least for this initial $25,000 grant. Hopefully we'll get anywhere between 8 and 10 businesses signed up, and we can get these signs on the road. But just in broader sense, this was even part of the 2019 agritourism work group, that wayfinding is extremely important in the ag reserve. You guys have been out there. It's not always the most straightforward way to get to a farm, so it's good to have those signs to point people to say, hey, I'm going in the right direction. So we're working on it. I do believe this is going to be a viable path forward. Thank you.
And this was a major topic of conversation in our first agritourism session last year. And I think it led to movement that we've finally seen with money. We can talk about it if there's no money to make it happen, then there's nothing. So I'm glad that this is moving forward. Is there anything else on this section before I open it up for questions? No? Okay, perfect. We want to welcome Councilmember Andrew Fritzen, who's joining us today. And we're going to start with Councilmember Balcom. Agritourism is a big topic of conversation. I just want to remind folks that the definition of agrotourism is something that everybody is concerned about. And today, item number 5 of our agenda, we are focusing on that particular topic. I just want to put that, just remind folks about that. So, Councilmember Balcom.
Great, thank you. So this is perfect timing, given that this weekend was the farm tour. So major shout out to Visit Montgomery and to Office of Ag for really showcasing the Ag Reserve. Appreciate that. And welcome to Delegate Lily Chi, my partner in the Ag Reserve. So appreciate all the work that you're doing. So just a couple questions. I'll go in order. The Office of the Maryland Office of Ag. So I think that I'm really excited to learn more about the value-added processing. I know that's not the topic of today, but I think that that's something that our farmers have certainly talked a lot about, to having more processing facilities, and so I'm looking forward to that. So when we talk about the unifying definition, so the state has a definition of agriculture. So are you thinking that there would be, that the local jurisdictions would adopt the same definition of agritourism? Is that something that you're looking to do? I guess that's Audrey, Ms. Broomfield.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm hurriedly checking the notes from my coworker who I'm covering for. But yes, I believe that they're hoping that through these continued conversations throughout the state, that the state will be able to take all that information and aggregate it together to try and create one definition of agriculture, which then eventually all the separate counties would be able to adopt as well, which would help to unify the state.
Yeah, the definition of agritourism.
Yes, agritourism.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And would that be guidelines or legislation?
That I am unsure of, and I would have to get back to you.
Okay.
And have my coworker follow up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to just say that the Department of Commerce and the study that Delegate Chi is moving forward, I think that's great. I heard from several farmers this weekend that you had visited them, and so that was much appreciated. And I guess from the perspective of the study on agritourism, so much has happened since 2019. When we look at the alcohol producers and how much has happened. So I'm glad that we're looking at that again and looking at what should come from that study. I know a lot of work was done. It was before my time on the council, but I think that it's important to dust that off and look at that. I appreciate that. And the ice cream trail, I think that's something that we definitely want to do. I've got a couple up my way, so that would be great. But I think that the challenge is that as we move away from, get further and further away from the 1980s, although the music has never gone away, but there's a challenge that there's a whole new generation of residents who don't have a full understanding of what the Ag Reserve is all about, why we have it, what is its purpose, what should we use it for, and so the challenge is, how do we educate people? How do we bring them into the Ag Reserve so they have that understanding and develop a love and appreciation and respect for the Ag Reserve? How do we encourage people to come, but still have the guardrails that we need to make sure that it remains a beautiful, pristine, bucolic setting? So that's the challenge I think that we're faced with right now, of how do we do that? What are those guardrails? And how are we going to be the keepers for the next 40 years? And so I think that we're at a pivotal moment in making sure that we have protections in place, but we also instill that love and respect for the Ag Reserve. And then the wayfinding grants, I was out there all weekend. I'm out there regularly, and most of the places where we need signs are the state roads, and so that's going to be an issue. I do know that we're in conversations. Someone mentioned the parking issue. We have two specific issues right now that's happening, and we need to figure out this leadership jurisdictional issue between MDE, DPS, Office of Ag, and be very clear for our farm owners on how that's going to work. And I also think the guidance, I look forward to the report that's coming out in September, that guidance on the parking, the Porta-John facilities, what those guidelines are. So I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are any from? Yeah, I think it was general. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this conversation and appreciate Councilmember Balcom setting up the discussion. I appreciated all the information that was provided in the PowerPoint and all the additional information in the packet, because I do think it sets the scene pretty well as to the goals and challenges of supporting. And one of the things that I found most informative during the presentation was the size of the farms that continue to change, and that is on their end. And so we as government, both locally and state, need to figure out how to support the changing environment that our farming community are living in day to day, and the challenges that brings. And this is all a cornucopia of ideas for us to digest and eventually to implement or tweak. But I want to give Delegate Chi the opportunity to talk a bit more about her leadership in Annapolis in putting forward this this bill, HB 1228, and charging the Commerce Department to look at this, because clearly, being in the community, Delegate Chi has heard and seen the challenges. And so, Delegate Chi, can you talk with us about what your motivation was, and also how we can work together to do right and better support our community?
Sure. Thank you. So it was, as a representative of Ag Reserve, we over the years have heard a lot of complaints, and just as the council members have, about how a sparsely populated community can get equitable basic services, even not just economic opportunity, but just basic services. And over the years, the council has done a lot to channel resources as well as the state, right? But we also want to facilitate an ecosystem that can organically grow in the modern era, as a strongly agricultural community. And I understand that about over maybe 11 years ago now, at least a decade ago, Orion Consulting conducted a pretty comprehensive economic development study commissioned by the town of Poolesville. But it was just for the Poolesville community. And it was a pretty impressive study that I read through front and back, and I learned a lot about what's possible. And it looked at other similar agricultural communities, about the kind of industries, including food innovation, meat packaging, and all that kind of things that could happen in an agricultural reserve kind of environment. But this study is not just for Poolesville, okay? And it's been over a decade. The market has changed a lot. So in the course of working with the local town leadership and fair access community and all of that, they raised the concerns about how to bring more economic opportunities to the agricultural community without disrupting the key characteristics. And now that we have more breweries and wineries, and the county has invested serious dollars in crossfines, right? How do we leverage all of these points of excellence and build an ecosystem that can support the larger community? And the CNL Canal study, which Lin Cowing, local community leader, brought to my attention, was an example of how we can look at where people came from, why they came to visit a community like Ag Reserve, and what they expect to get out of it. What kind of disposable income do they choose to spend, beyond wineries, breweries, but we have many unique assets that are hidden. How do we elevate all of them? But also, there are small businesses that need support of the larger community, not just people who reside within that zip code to thrive, right? So there are a lot of elements of consideration. I appreciate the Councilmember Balcom's comments about, how we can preserve that as a key focus, while also, push forward a new kind of economy.
I appreciate that, and you're absolutely right about trying to maintain that balance even as the dynamics continue to evolve and the size of the average farm continues to change, the breweries and wineries. And, just last week I was at an event with two, I'll say young people, younger than I, right? That's an evolving dynamic as well, as more and more people are younger than I. And sharing with them the beauty that is our Ag Reserve. And they were not aware of anything really north of Rockville. And I said, yeah, now's the great time, go out there, and continuing to let people know about what's up there while also supporting the individuals who are working and living up there. So thank you, Delegate Chi, for your leadership in pushing this forward. I know this is the second conversation, but I will presume that once the department comes out with its report, we'll have a third conversation and potentially more action items after that. And clearly, thank you to everybody who does this work day in, day out with members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're going to have another work session just on agritourism once the report comes out, and see how we can be actively moving forward. With that, Councilmember Sells.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our presenters contributing to this discussion. I've long been passionate about the agricultural reserve being the largest in the nation and trying to encourage table food production as well. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation to understand where we are and where we have the opportunity to go. And given this being the largest ag reserve in the nation in Montgomery County. And this sector is also the largest revenue producer for the state economy. I'm just wondering how the state is dealing with workforce challenges stemming from immigration and deportations that we are hearing about. And then how is our state working, or are there plans to work with local jurisdictions to leverage this asset to ensure its long-term success? Well, we had our Maryland Department of Commerce, so I don't know if they want to contribute, or anyone here, Delegate Chi. So any of our partners who are joining us virtually, if you have anything to share.
I think I would probably have to defer to my colleagues at the Department of Agriculture on the workforce issue there, and that might be, I mean, I think that is more in their wheelhouse, but I mean, we were here as an update on the study. I'm not really able to speak to specific issues on
Workforce challenges.
workforce. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone?
Councilmember Sales,
Yes.
good morning.
Good morning.
So
Mr.
you
Shepard.
touched on some very important issues in the ag community, agritourism community. So in Montgomery County, we are fortunate that a lot of people are interested in agriculture. The population wants to come out and see the farms, but as you touched on, that takes people to run these operations.
Yes.
If not for our country's H-2A visa program, the vast majority of these pick-your-own operations would cease to exist.
Mm-hmm.
So these operations rely on this H-2A program. These are legal immigrant visas. These families, in some cases, have come to these farms for 30 or 40 years. So these are highly trained, highly specialized staff that help these operations go. So the county cannot replace that workforce, and this is something that we continue to work for with our state level, with our federal partners. We continue to push for the H-2A program and share just how important that is. On the other value-added side, on workforce challenges, Natalia put together a meeting for our livestock processing facility producers across the state. We have a number of them that are close to the county, and they shared pretty much the same story that is the same with the agriculture community as well. As they like doing what they're doing, but that next generation coming online just isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
So Penn State has a livestock processing program that a lot of these young kids who go through that program, the jobs waiting for them are at like your grocery stores, so Giant Foods. So they're taking the talent, good talent, learning how to do these things. Then they're not going to the mom and pop shops that are doing the livestock processing for our producers. They're going to these national chains. It was not the most heartwarming conversation we've ever had. They put out a lot of concerns, not only with just the lack of workforce, but oversight from the federal level as well. Much like we're talking about here, inconsistent application of the law has been a long-standing frustration with our livestock producers. We work with our partners at the Southern Maryland Agricultural Development Corporation, SMATIC, Marbitco as well, to try to not only invest in these businesses, but try to make that pipeline of the new workforce come forward. But that's a challenge. It's not unique to agriculture, but we're hoping and helping to get these young kids who are interested in it a foot in the door so they can be the next people running these businesses.
Now, I heard about some of the programs being cut with MCPS. Is there any way that we can support advocating for inclusion in other ways, or do we know where that conversation's going?
That's a good question. Our county offers the Food, Fiber, and You mobile trailer that goes to, depending on the budget year, 30, 40 elementary schools across this county. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate enough with our county executive and the county council that we didn't have to dip into that to cut that to make our budget reductions. So we continue that conversation with the public school system. Statewide, again, this is the same story. It's not unique to Montgomery County. Getting ag in the classroom is not easy. and we continue to have those conversations. We work closely with the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation. They're actually the ones who outfitted that trailer that we take to the elementary schools. So if we want to loop back, we can have that conversation with the MAVE staff as well.
Sounds good. Just a few more questions. Just looking at the suggestions on policies that the state delegation can consider in the upcoming session. Currently, there are conversations underway with MDOT and MDA about simplifying the TAC program for smaller rural businesses. Do you have anything else to? No. Okay. Okay. And then how are we, we just held the graduation for MCPS's Summer Rise program. I don't know if the Office of Ag took advantage of any interns over the summer for the, okay. And then when we're thinking about agritourism across the country, across the county, how are the farmers playing a role in updating the definition, or how are they engaged to participate in that discussion?
Sure. So we have 2 county-sponsored agricultural committees or boards. We have the Agricultural Advisory Committee and our Agricultural Preservation Advisory Board. They serve 2 distinct functions, but they speak with one voice for the concern of agriculture at the county and the state level. We have met probably the last 8 meetings with our Ag Advisory Committee to talk about ag tourism, to talk about kind of what's next with it. And the Ag Advisory Committee basically holds two things to be true. And Council Member Balcom touched on this. Why the Ag Reserve was created, for farming as the preferred and primary land use. That should never be forgotten in the Ag Advisory Committee's mind. Secondly, farmers respond to market forces. So the ag community, I know you've had many conversations with them, feel strongly about more regulation. They like the definition that is currently in place in our Chapter 59, the definition of farming, letter F, which basically is our ag tourism definition. And the reason they like it is it's clear to a point, and that point is where the innovation occurs. Mm-hmm. So in that discussion, when Mr. Butler outlined our monthly meetings with DPS and park and planning and other agencies as needed, we talk about these unique ideas that folks are sharing with us. And there are some very interesting ideas, some really good ideas. And where we think our definition of farming is helpful is because we can make a lot of ideas work, that we keep that nexus to agriculture that is so important in the master plan of 1980, and it allows for innovation because of how that definition is worded. So yes, the agriculture community is very much involved in this discussion.
Oh, good. And then do we know the amount of acres that are unaccounted for, like that are unowned by farmers, and are we creating pathways to ownership of any unaccounted for land?
So Montgomery County, as a highly developed county, has been speculated since day one with our relationship to DC and the federal governments and all the new administrations. So through our farmland preservation program, where in the 1980s it was about 65 to 70% non-resident, or not non-resident, but people who weren't fully engaged in the agriculture operation. Mm-hmm. So they were renting out to their leases to the farmers. Through our farmland preservation programs, which Mike Wyan now runs, we have got that number to not quite 55, 45, but it's probably 60 to 65% farmer-owned now. The challenge, one of the big challenges basically for new and beginning, really anybody who wants to get into farming, is that access to land. So we do have our farmland preservation programs. We can work with new and beginning farmers on them. The big challenge with land acquisition is not only cost, but the time to get that cost to the person selling the property. So our farmland preservation programs work, but land acquisition is not straightforward and it is not fast. So even if someone meets all the criteria, it's hard to make someone who's selling land wait for 6 months when they have a cash offer within a couple weeks. So we've worked with our state partners at Marbidco with their small acreage, next generation preservation programs. We have 2 successful cases of that in Montgomery County. It can work.
Okay.
It's just land acquisition is not the most straightforward issue to deal with.
So how many acres are we talking about that are up for land acquisition, do you think? Can you estimate?
So we roughly have 25,000 acres under purchase development right easements. So those are easements where public dollars were used. Within the ag reserve of 93-ish thousand acres, we're probably talking 20,000 acres at any given moment that if the price was right, a landowner would be willing to talk about selling.
To acquire all 20,000 acres?
Well, there's multiple different landowners,
Okay.
multiple different states of life. It could be in a trust. Some of our biggest landowners are trusts, so it's kind of hard to navigate that bureaucracy. Land acquisition, like I said, is not the most straightforward and easy nut to crack.
Yeah, it would be helpful. I remember when, the Ag Reserve was on MCEDC's website, there were, bullet points about how to acquire land in the Ag Reserve. But it's hard to even think about pathways to land acquisition if people don't know what's available. So it would be helpful to identify, and I don't know the last time the Ag Reserve has been surveyed, to find out who owns what's available, and what those pathways are, and how we can update the website to include that information to ensure that next generation farmers have opportunities to take ownership of this precious land. And so I'll stop there and look forward to the next segment.
Great questions. I'm going to ask the Department of Commerce and Ag to please don't go away. Stay there because we might ask questions for you. We're going to ask Vincent Montgomery with Miss Kelly Groff to please come forward. And some of you can stay if you want to. And then after Ms. Kelly is done with her presentation, we're gonna talk with staff about the definition of agritourism. Some ideas. We're not taking any decisions today, so please don't. I can feel it.
Good morning, Council Chair Panny Gonzalez and members of the committee, and Councilmember Friedson. Kelly Groff, President and CEO of Visit Montgomery. You have our presentation in your packet today. I'm just going to walk through a few things and give you a little background. When we saw our winery, brewery, distillery industry growing in the county, we decided to launch a self-guided Tastemakers Trail tour so that people could find these locations and help support our businesses. Around that time was when the 2019 study came out from the Department of Planning. And so we also closely looked at some of the recommendations that came out of that study that directly were relative to what we do in marketing Montgomery County. And then we took a pause because in 2020 things changed dramatically. But one thing that did change is the people's love for the outdoors and the travel trends to be outside. And that has really stood and remained the same since the pandemic. So during this time, we were lucky to receive a grant from the Maryland Office of Tourism through the Economic Development Administration to do some more work and study on agritourism and what is offered in Montgomery County. I do want to set the record straight. This is not just about the Ag Reserve and that line. It is about the C&O Canal. It is about historic sites. It's about things in Olney. It's broader than just the Ag Reserve. And so we've been working with a company that does a lot of work like this around the country. They're very in tune to sustainability, they're very in tune to balance, and they're very in tune to making sure the community has a voice and is at the table. The company is called Civic Brand. So we have wrapped up our brand, our farmer survey, our consumer survey, the development of a playlist of songs that come to mind from people in our community about how they would describe the rural area of Montgomery County. And so we are at the brand audit phase. And on August 27th and 28th, Civic Brand will present in 2 different sessions, same topic, to be able to get as many people to the table as possible. They're going to talk about the results of the survey. I will tell you in advance that looking at some of the results on both the consumer side and the farmer side, what I'm seeing a majority of is signage, which we talked about today, marketing and branding help, but also places to stay. So I just want to remind everybody that still is a topic within the community. So following the brand audit, we'll take comments and listen to the community, and at some point we will come out with a really good logo and slogan that we can use to package together an experience of all of that area of Montgomery County that we can use to bring visitors to the county. And we are also working with a tour guide to develop a narrative tour, to do some test touring via passenger vans to take people on stops through the Ag Reserve, through the wineries and breweries. So there will be some themed tours that we're going to test to see how they are taken by the residents, but also by influencers, to see if there might be something down the road we could do on a regular basis. Again, you have our packet. You'll see Bilal has on the screen now kind of the journey we've been on through this process. And again, this would not have been possible without the Economic Development Administration grant. Super excited to be working with everybody, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much for all your exciting work. And we're going to ask staff if we can start talking about your work on agritourism, and then we're going to open it up for everybody. Okay?
Thank you. Yes, this is honestly just a brief primer for discussion. We did a very high-level research, and I want to give a shout-out to our graduate assistant, Mr. Colin Larson, who really dug into this issue. You know, as we were preparing for this work session, we were doing a lot of research to figure out what the topics of discussion could be, and I think one of the main themes that was raised by various stakeholders was the definition of agritourism and the challenge of specific cases and whether or not they meet that definition. And those were typically the types of issues that people were describing when they're talking about policy changes the council could consider. What is and isn't agritourism? And there are various cases, I think, that are ongoing as well that people are aware of that also touch on this. Generally, the zoning ordinance does not actually have an agritourism definition today at the county level. It is defined under the definition of farming. That is unlike, for example, farm alcohol production, which is a limited use and has its own definition. You can see on page 2 the definition of accessory agricultural education agritourism activities under the definition of farming. And then on page 3 we provided just the state's definition of agritourism, which you can see as well. And you know, I think there's some counties in the state have adopted the state's definition of agritourism. Some have adopted their own based on the state's definition. Those are also options available to the council, of course, in whatever, you know, you could pick any variation of that definition. But more broadly, I think the research sort of raised the bigger policy question of, to the extent that agritourism is a specific concept, and there are pros and cons to defining it, as Director Scheffel has pointed out. You know, is there a way to sort of think about tourism in the ag reserve that's not necessarily related to tourism, to agritourism? I think a lot of farms struggle to sometimes maybe make a direct connection between their farming activity, their property, and the agritourism activity that they think might be appropriate, but doesn't necessarily align neatly with any definition of agritourism, particularly around things like outdoor event spaces, a use that embraces the rural context of a farm, may or may not be agritourism depending on the proposed activity, But I think it's a bigger question for all of you is, and other stakeholders in the community of, is something like that appropriate? You can see on page 7 a few illustrative examples, very high-level examples of event venues that exist in rural contexts in this region. And they host events like weddings, for example. Some have a music component. Whether or not they'd be permitted here under our current land use regulation or the zoning ordinance is not clear. We didn't research that. But the point is we could see how we have heard of examples where concepts like this run into that issue of, are they meeting agritourism and how? And I think there's a question of, could something like this with very strict parameters, some outdoor use defining the zoning ordinance with whatever parameters that the council and stakeholders feel are appropriate, that sort of relieves farms from having to meet agritourism, but creates a clear and defined use that is still acceptable and potentially generates some economic activity and tourism in the ag reserve. So there's some basic information about that in the packet. I think some of the policy pathways for you all to consider, which would be really more research, obviously, more so than any legislation, but thinking about what are some of the types of venues that could be acceptable, and giving us some parameters for research that we could then go dig into, work with stakeholders to really come back with some answers for more discussion, whether that's at the PHP committee or some joint committee with ECON, to just talk about, what are some of the policy pathways, something like a conditional use, which is reviewed by OZA, Office of Zoning and Administrative Hearings, or a limited use, which has very strict parameters, are ways to enable something that's outside the parameters of agritourism specifically, but still potentially consistent with agriculture. There's a lot of trade-offs here, a lot of pros and cons. I think Office of Ag, DPS, other enforcement agencies will have views on this, and so really just wanted to tee up that discussion for you all to kind of dig into it here, and then maybe give us some guidance as council staff and other staff to take this forward if that's of interest.
Excellent. I think you laid out the issue very well. We have some challenges. I'm just going to keep it that way. With certain businesses and including farms that are struggling because we don't have a clear answer for many of these things. And it's not fair for folks who already, who want to do agritourism or just tourism. It's not fair not to have a clear guideline. And it's not fair to our staff when they cannot provide clear answers to some of these challenges. I think it's great that the State Department of Commerce and the Department of Agriculture, they're looking at these issues in their own way. I look forward to the report, but we as a county, especially as soon as we start getting their recommendations at the state level, need to come together and figure this out. Who is responsible of what? What do we mean? What are the clear definitions? What are the clear regulations? Are we going to move forward with conditional use or limited use? If that, then this conversation has to be joined with the PHP committee, which is the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, where I serve as well. And it's great that we have the chair of that committee here today. But it's a conversation that we as a county cannot continue to avoid. So I'm going to leave it there. Councilmember Sales has a few comments.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Groff, for the update. I was thinking about how do we engage more farmers, in our economy, and how do we, talk more about how our farmers are playing a role in our hospitality industry, and wanted to pitch a restaurant week. We've been celebrating and recognizing Farmers Appreciation Day at the council for the past few years, and to build upon that, we wanted to elevate that this year. But there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between our hospitality industry and our farming industry as well. So we're pivoting and thinking about a symposium in the fall instead. And so just thinking about, the engagement that you've taken to develop the branding strategy, can you share a bit about how the feedback was sorted and how you applied it to the recommendations?
So the full study's not complete yet, the feedback. It was consumer, but also farmers. And I do agree with you. We probably should think about some more work in connecting the restaurants with the farmers so that they're understanding that those products are available. There are many restaurants that are using local product, but the more we talk about that, the more it's going to help the restaurant industry and the farmers. I do want to comment that being out in the community, and I have an employee with me today, Maria Bardos, who lives in Poolesville, so she's out in the community quite a bit, the farming community. And I would just recommend that we listen carefully. I'm talking to young farmers, talking to farmers that have, are first generation farmers. But I think that we have to, what I'm hearing and where I think we can be successful as economic developers is to be sure to listen carefully to their needs and make sure that we are going in a direction that can help the current generation, but also future generations be successful. That is the biggest thing I've gotten out of all my travels.
I agree. With all of the technological and ecological advancements in the industry, this definition is certainly going to be different and hopefully helpful to the next generation of farmers. And then how will the targeted outreach strategies for specific demographics be included?
So in the package, you saw some of the research we've been able to do through Symphony, but we need to drill down a little further. And I'm really excited to be working with the members that are here today. I'm glad we're all at the table.
Yes.
So we each know our role and what each of us are doing. So there's not overlap, but collaboration. So Symphony has provided us some baseline data that we can use, but it's not as drilled down as new data we're going to be subscribing to through Zartico. So I'm not going to get in the weeds on the data, but we will definitely be back to share more information about what we're seeing and any trends.
Okay, all right. And Symphony will help with diversifying the audience for engagement.
Symphony is the platform that pulls all the tools together, all the research tools together into some guiding principles and basic data for us to work from for the future.
Okay. And then I know you talked about the agritourism experiences for that you're curating for the Ag Reserve and different spaces across the county. How are we encouraging underserved communities or engaging with underserved communities to educate them about the Ag Reserve and agritourism?
So nothing comes to mind right away. I did listening to what's happening at the public school system and how we can educate our students, but I think that is something we need to keep having conversations about as we roll out bringing more people to better understand the ag space through education opportunities.
Yeah, we have, I know we're focused on Montgomery County, but there's so many different farms across the state that we can learn from and see, what's happening in other jurisdictions. I'm glad to see that we're thinking about bus tours to our wineries. A lot of barriers to, enjoying the Ag Reserve has been the travel and transportation challenges. So I'm glad to see that. But we also want to diversify the demographics who are enjoying the Ag Reserve. And I know that when Crossvines first opened, we saw a lot of influencers there. I don't know how regularly we engage with influencers. I know that was part of your budget requests over the last year. I don't know how many years, but please continue to keep us updated and Mr. Sheffel as well on how we can continue to diversify the engagement, because it's an incredible asset and I just want to ensure we're leveraging it to the max. And so I've seen concerts, wine festivals, music festivals. There are so many opportunities to, share this resource with broader communities. And I just want to ensure we're doing all that we can, and the partners we're working with are also on the same page in diversifying the experiences in the Ag Reserve for many people that live not just here, but visitors that we can attract here as well. Thank you.
Excellent comments, Councilmember Sales. Just reminded me the whole, and you were a co-sponsor, the whole effort to pass the zoning text amendment for the overnight stays, and that was the whole goal, to ensure that we open it up, that we have more people understand the Ag Reserve and be there and appreciate it, because the Ag Reserve is for Montgomery County, it's for everybody. So with that, Councilmember Balcom.
Sure, thank you. Just a short note on the farm to table relationship. It's so hard for farmers to make these relationships with the restaurants, and very often it's a individual farmer with an individual buyer, and those relationships have to be nurtured. I just talked with one of our farmers over the weekend, where there's new staff at the restaurant, and they have to start from scratch into building that relationship. So I think that would be a great way that we can help the economic underpinning of the Ag Reserve, is to really help our table crop farmers have access to restaurants and other retail. And I really look forward to the branding. I think it's very exciting. The pilots of various tours, we've been talking about that for a long time, of how do we get people out in a safe way and go from place to place. So I think that's really important. And from the perspective of moving forward, and I know, Ms. Groff, that you've done an excellent job of really bringing in everyone at the table in this in your branding study, so I appreciate that. And I would just say to the committee, we need to do the same. As we go forward, I agree, farming is a very difficult business. We know that. And I think it's, of course, important that we listen to the new generation of farmers. They have smaller farms and they're just getting started, and we need to listen to what they have to say. We also need to listen to our legacy farmers. Our legacy farmers are the individuals who worked hard to make sure that we have an Ag Reserve to begin with. So for the past 45 years, these are the individuals who made sure that the Ag Reserve was protected, not just for the past 45 years, but in some families for the past 150 years. So we just need to make sure that in every discussion that we have about how, if and when we are going to evolve the definition of what agritourism is, that all those voices are heard and respected. So thank you.
Great point. Wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Balkin. We need to ensure, as we move forward, we're definitely going to have community engagement sessions, including App County, as we did in the first work session that we had. The session that we had on agritourism was actually in the history farm. We didn't hold it here, just to ensure that we have, to make it easier for people to attend. We're going to have to do that again. We're here because of those legacy farmers, and we want to ensure that their voices are respected. So yes. With that, Councilmember Andrew Friedson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate this conversation. Appreciate Councilmember Balcom for her perspective here, and Councilmember Sales as well. The former council member of the home of one of the great agricultural institutions in the state of Maryland and in Montgomery County, even though Gaithersburg is not in the Ag Reserve. So appreciate it. So everybody brings a unique perspective here, and we're coming up to the Ag Fair, in fact, and I know all of us will continue to enjoy it. I'm here with a couple hats on. besides the fact that I used to be the person who represented most of the agricultural reserve portion of Councilmember Balcom's district, I also chair the Food and Agricultural Policy Committee at the Council of Governments. And we are having this conversation and question about local agriculture and the challenges that local agriculture faces, that our local food system faces in light of all of the federal dynamics, and coming up with a more resilient local food system and agricultural system is essential. It's not unique to Montgomery County, and it is something that I think is really important. So, I'm also chair of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, as noted before, when we talk about the question of the definitions. As we move forward, very much a Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee conversation that we need to have and will continue to have. It's complicated, and it is an ongoing dynamic of balancing environmental sustainability and land use policy and economic vitality. For the agricultural reserve to work, it has to be both environmentally sustainable and economically viable. That means farming and agriculture must be viable. That is a complicated dynamic. It should be not to replace agriculture with other industry, but to supplement the revenue streams with which traditional agriculture can function, because it is such a difficult business, as Councilmember Balcom noted. I'll just echo the comments about the legacy farmers and the emerging farmers. This isn't a one versus another. This is a yes and it has to be a yes and. We would not be where we are. We would not have the privilege of this conversation, which most similar jurisdictions don't have a conversation about how to continue to protect and preserve agriculture, because their agriculture is gone. And their agriculture is now sprawl development. We have an agricultural reserve to discuss, to protect, to preserve, as complicated and challenging as it might be, because of thoughtful decisions that were made and significant sacrifices that have been made by legacy farmers and previous policymakers. And we carry on that legacy, and we have to carry on that legacy. And I think it should weigh on us in each and every decision that we make. But we won't continue to have an agricultural reserve 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now if we aren't thinking about emerging farmers, if we aren't addressing the fact that the average age of a farmer, not just in our community, but across the region and throughout the country, is getting older, not younger. And that is presenting a challenge. And unless we are attracting and providing opportunities to new and emerging farmers, and unless we're connecting the people who live in the rest of the county with the incredible asset that we have in the agricultural reserve, we have failed to live up to what the legacy policymakers and agricultural families have done for us. So, I think this has gotten in at times to an us versus them threat dynamic, and I think that's really unfortunate. I think we have to recognize that we're here because of decisions and sacrifices that were made. We have the opportunity to have these debates, which is a privilege for all of us, but we have to be sober about that privilege and that opportunity and understand how we got here. And I just really appreciate the fact that we're having this conversation. One of the great selling points of Montgomery County is that we have urban, suburban, and rural in close proximity, and all the benefits of each of those things. You can literally work in a business in downtown Silver Spring or in downtown Wheaton or in downtown Bethesda, and you can be on a farm that evening to have wine, to get local crops, to enjoy the benefits of agriculture. That is not common in most other places around the country. It didn't happen by chance. It happened by choices. I think it's our job to continue to make those choices, as difficult as they could be, and bring people together to make sure that the stakeholders are actually impacted by the decisions. The last thing that I'll say, it's not just emerging farmers and large farmers. It's not just legacy farmers, large farmers, and small farmers. There's also what you are harvesting changes the type of business that you are. And I think we have to make sure that food crops and commodity farmers, whether you're selling soybeans or turf or cucumbers or corn, it changes the type of business that you have. And we have to recognize that we sometimes lump agriculture into one category, and it really isn't one category. It's a very different type of business. It requires very different types of things. The sensitivities are very different, the needs and the intensity of the size of land. You can't scale a certain operation if you're growing a certain type of crop. And I just want us to make sure that we're remembering that. And if we have a truly successful ecosystem in our agricultural network, we would have thriving small farms, we would have thriving large farms, we would have food and table crops, and we would have commodity crops. We would have everything, within reason, within the climate, allowing us, and the soils allowing us to do that. It's no different than the broader economy. When we get into this small business versus large business, or a certain type of industry versus another, we lose the benefits of having an ecosystem where one benefits the other, and there is a symbiotic dynamic and relationship. So just wanted to put that out there. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate the conversations and all the leadership that this committee has shown. We have tried to find the right balance of ag and the ag reserve as a land use primary dynamic, but also recognize that the question of agritourism and the economic dynamics is very much at the center of the county's economy and should be very much at the center of what this committee discusses. And so I appreciate the time that you've taken for that and allowing me to join you.
Thank you so much. For sure, we're going to have a joint committee work session on this. Just to recap very quickly, as it was mentioned, the Maryland Department of Agriculture is going to have their value-added report out in September of this year. And then the Department of Commerce is going to have the report out in June of 2026. We'll coordinate because we do need some type of community event up county after the Department of Agriculture report is out in September. So we can start there, and at that event, we should definitely have the folks from the Department of Commerce to join and listening as they work on the report. I think that will be helpful as we dig into this definition and what changes we should be doing in terms of conditional or limited use, and that will be a PHP work session. That's why I think that community meeting should probably be coordinated with PHP. So we can just work smoothly. With that, thank you so much for all your time and your dedication for Montgomery County. This committee is adjourned.